Hello, all you midnight romantics and ancient gossip enthusiasts. Tonight, we slip quietly under the tattered canopy of a medieval moon, somewhere between a bramble-choked hedgerow and the snoring of distant livestock. Here, where the damp mist tangles itself in your hair, and every shadow hides a secret. We're about to uncover history's strangest flirting tips, love potions, and matchmaking disasters. You might think your dating life is complicated, but let's be honest, have you ever received advice involving frog entrails, moon phases, or a priest's opinion on the right amount of onion breath for seduction? Medieval people made things weird before weird was a compliment. And tonight, we're unpacking it all one lace-riddled, hay-stuffed, superstition-soaked tale at a time. If you enjoy wandering through history's awkward family dinners and candlelit disasters, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell only if you're genuinely amused by the idea of medieval speed dating. If you're tuning in right now from Prague at 2:03 a.m., or maybe Singapore at 9:00 in the morning, drop a comment and tell me, are you wrapped in a velvet blanket, or just wondering whether your houseplants would survive in a medieval castle. Now, you can dim the lights, crack the window for a breeze that might or might not carry the scent of roasted turnips, and join me for a stroll through the lost art of courtly confusion, because tonight, you're about to discover the most bizarre dating advice from medieval times and more. You arrive in the middle of the medieval countryside, sometime after sunset, at that hour when the mist rises in pale blue swirls and the last rays of sunlight sink behind lopsided rooftops. The world smells like wet earth, wood smoke, and the faint, almost hopeful aroma of cow dung drifting on the breeze, a reminder that romance here is always a little bit messy. Your feet squelch on the muddy path as you follow the only light in the village, a golden lantern hanging from a thatched eave, swinging in the night wind like a promise or a dare. The air feels charged, alive with secrets, and just as you're debating whether to knock or simply flee, the door swings open with a creak and a muttered curse. And there stands Magda, the wise woman, matchmaker, healer, herbalist, and, depending on who you ask, minor menace to polite society. Magda's eyes are sharp and knowing, the kind that could spot a lie across a crowded market or a love-struck fool at 50 paces. She beckons you inside, her bony hand surprisingly strong. The room is smoky, dim, and if you're honest, absolutely reeking of garlic. Bundles of herbs hang from every rafter. In the corner, a black cat with one eye half closed is either dozing or quietly plotting to inherit the cottage. Come for a love potion, have you? Magda says, her voice rasping like a crow. Or maybe just looking to forget one. She laughs, the sound somewhere between a cackle and a cough, and shuffles over to a battered table littered with jars, bottles, feathers, stones, and at least 3 objects you hope are vegetables. You try to protest, to say you're just curious, just passing by, but curiosity is a dangerous thing in medieval times, and Magda has already begun her performance. She rummages in a battered basket, coming up with a handful of wild leeks, a sprig of rosemary, and a pinch of something that might once have been ginger. With every movement, her bracelets clatter, her rings flash, and her cat opens a suspicious yellow eye. Love, my dear, is simple, Magda declares. But people, they're complicated. That's why we have potions. She drops the leeks into a chipped pot, pours in a splash of cloudy cider, and sets the whole mess to simmer on a smoky fire. The liquid fizzes, bubbles, and emits a smell that's part garden, part graveyard, and just a hint of hope. As you watch, she throws in other ingredients. Honey, for sweetness because love should never be entirely bitter. A touch of garlic, for health, and, as she winks, to keep away rivals who faint at the smell, a few rose petals crushed with the back of her spoon, and finally, a lock of hair hers, yours, or the unlucky object of your affection. You want the spell to stick, something personal. Always, she advises, as if discussing the best way to patch a leaky roof. You glance around. The walls are plastered with scraps of parchment recipes, blessings, and one that reads, for heartbreak ale, sleep, and a new dance partner. Jars are labeled in a spidery hand, basil, for boldness, moss, for mending, Toadstool for forgetfulness. Each one seems to pulse with its own little secret. The whole place vibrates with the feeling that, here, anything is possible if not advisable. Magda bustles about, muttering, "You know, in my youth, I made a potion for the Lord's youngest daughter. Swore it'd make the stable boy fall for her. He did right into the pond, spent a week croaking like a frog. But they were married by Michaelmas." She snorts, adds a dash of cider vinegar, and grins at you as if she's just let you in on the greatest joke in the world. The potion thickens, the scent growing stranger and more complicated. It's the aroma of spring rain, of regret, of mud and midnight and secret wishes. You realize you are no longer quite sure if you want to drink it, give it away, or throw it out the window and run for the hills. But Magda is undeterred. She grabs a battered ladle, scoops up a steaming measure, and pours it into a chipped mug. She hands it to you. Her hands are warm and rough, her smile sly. Go on, then, for luck. Or at least, for a good story tomorrow. You bring the mug to your lips and, for a moment, you can almost taste every wild hope you've ever nursed in the dark. The potion is sharp, sweet, and oddly bracing like cider laced with onions and a little too much ambition. You hesitate. Will it work, you ask, half hoping she'll say no. Magda shrugs, her face softening for just a second. Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes. The magic's in the trying. She leans closer. Besides, half the fun's in the chase, not the catch. You set the mug down, your lips tingling, your heart beating just a little faster. Outside, the wind has picked up. Somewhere, a dog barks, a horse nickers in its stall. Inside, Magda begins to tidy up, humming to herself. Her cat returns to its nap, convinced the world is, for tonight at least, exactly as it should be. Before you leave, Magda presses a small, tightly wrapped bundle into your hand. "Rosemary and lavender," she says, "for courage. And so you don't smell like the potion." She winks. A little advice loves best when it's unexpected, and potions are best when they're only half believed. You step outside into the moonlight, the bundle warm in your palm, the taste of the potion lingering on your tongue. The night is alive, uncertain, full of wild promise. You realize that, sometimes, believing in a little magic is the best way to find it. You breathe deep, the smell of leek and hope drifting on the breeze. A hush. The fire crackles behind you. Somewhere, an owl calls your name. You keep walking, potion or not, into the uncertain night. You wake not to the gentle caress of sunlight or the crowing of some overeager rooster, but to the sound of soft giggles and the feathery flutter of 100 fans, each more elaborate than the last. Welcome to the bustling, slightly chaotic heart of a medieval marketplace, where the air is heavy with the scent of sweat, cinnamon, roasting meat, and if you sniff a little closer, a faint whiff of desperation. Yes, you've just landed in the prime hunting grounds of medieval romance, the town square. Equal parts gossip factory, catwalk, and accidental obstacle course. It's market day, and everyone who's anyone and many who aren't is here to buy, sell, trade, barter, and most importantly, flirt. Forget Instagram DMs, here. Your message is folded neatly into a fan's flick or a peacock feather's twitch. You press into the crowd, your shoes sticky with yesterday's spilled mead, your ears assaulted by the chorus of hawkers, and the sun already plotting against your forehead. And then you spot them, the women of the town, arrayed like a garden in full, slightly tipsy bloom, their heads crowned with coifs and kerchiefs, their eyes sharp behind painted fans or fluttering handkerchiefs. A merchant's daughter leans against a barrel of apples, accidentally dropping her fan so many times you suspect the apples are jealous of the attention. Every gesture is a sentence, every flutter of lace a secret message. See, in this world, words are dangerous too, forward, too risky. But fans and feathers. Entire love stories unfold in the silent ballet of their movements. A closed fan pressed to the lips. Meet me by the well after sunset. A slow wave left to right. I'm interested, but my mother's watching. A brisk, agitated flick. You stepped on my dog last Sunday and I haven't forgiven you. No need for poetry when your accessories do the talking. You decide to try your luck, and, with the stealth of a nervous squirrel, you sidle up to a group of giggling girls beside the haberdasher's stall. One of them, let's call her Marjorie, because there's always a Marjorie twirls a peacock feather between her fingers like she's been practicing since birth. The feather glints in the sun, a flash of blue and green, bold and just a little bit smug. The language of feathers, Marjorie whispers conspiratorially, is much older than courtly love. She winks at you, which you realize might mean hello, stranger, or just as easily. That's my basket of onions. Back off. Peacock feathers are everywhere this season. You learn. Because nothing says, choose me quite like the tail of a bird, famous for strutting its stuff in the middle of the yard and yelling at sunrise. Feathers tucked into hair, into hats. Even dangling from belts, each one broadcasting something about its wearer. A blue feather, I'm loyal, at least until Michaelmas. A red one, I'm passionate, but may also be prone to starting small fires. A quail feather, I like long walks and complaining about the price of cheese. And then there are the fans. Not just for fluttering in the heat or swatting away persistent flies, but for sending coded signals to anyone clever or desperate enough to notice. The fan is a shield, a mask, a weapon, and, occasionally, an impromptu frisbee when the flirting gets a little too enthusiastic. You watch as Marjorie's friend Beatrice, she of the sharp elbows and sharper wit, snaps her fan shut with a crack that silences 3 nearby chickens and 1 unlucky suitor. Message received. You wander further, caught in a current of market traffic, swept past stalls selling everything from velvet ribbons to questionable sausages, all the while watching the dance of fans and feathers play out around you. It's as if the entire village is performing a silent opera, each aria sung in silk and goose down. The baker's wife, her hands dusted with flour, hides a fan in her apron, flicking it open every time her husband's back is turned. The blacksmith's apprentice, cheeks red as forge embers, wears a turkey feather in his cap. He's earnest. If a little overeager, suddenly, an old woman shuffles by, cackling under her breath, her fan patched and battered, but still wielded with the confidence of someone who's seen 100 May days and knows exactly which farmer's son will sneak a kiss behind the church at dusk. Used to be, she rasps at you. A girl could land a husband with a well-timed wink and a clean shift. Now, you need a dictionary just to keep up. She winks, proving her point. There's a kind of magic in the air, the magic of possibility, of coded words and unspoken invitations. Every flutter is hope, every ruffle is risk. You catch yourself glancing down at your own hands, wondering if you should be holding something, flicking something, making a silent declaration of your own. You reach for a stray feather robin, perhaps, or maybe pigeon. It's unclear, and nobody wants to claim it. You slip it behind your ear, feeling both ridiculous and strangely emboldened for a moment. You are part of the dance, part of the secret language, swept up in the tide of medieval flirtation. Does anyone notice? Maybe, maybe not. That's the beauty of it, the uncertainty, the thrill, the quiet gamble, as the market begins to thin, shadows lengthening, and the first hints of roasting onions waft from the tavern. You realize something else? The language of fans and feathers isn't just about love or lust. It's about being seen, about turning the mundane into the magical, about claiming your moment, even if it's only for a heartbeat. Before the world rolls on, a girl with a red ribbon in her hair flicks her fan open. Just for you, you smile, a small, secret smile, and wonder if you've just been invited to the next chapter or gently warned away from the pickpocket circling near the cheese stall. You step away from the crowd, feathers still tucked behind your ear, the dance of fans and feathers echoing in your mind. The square is quieter now, but the stories linger, swirling on the evening breeze, ready to be told again tomorrow. A hush, a single feather floats down, landing at your feet. You smile, and the market exhales into twilight. You slip through the battered doors of a medieval great hall, feet scuffing against flagstones worn smooth by generations of nervous suitors and overeager minstrels. And immediately the temperature seems to drop a degree, though that's probably just the draft squeezing past the tapestries embroidered with stories nobody really remembers. You're not alone. The whole place hums with a kind of tension, the kind that happens when everyone in the room is pretending not to stare at everyone else. This, my friend, is the courtly love zone. Forget what you learned from modern dating shows or awkward wedding receptions. Here, the rules are stricter, the punishments for breaking them more creative, and the potential for embarrassment is, well, let's just say, off the charts. You can almost smell the anticipation in the air. Or maybe it's just the wax from 1,000 guttering candles, mingling with the spicy tang of last night's mead and the faint, lingering perfume of somebody's ambitious rosewater experiment. You slip to the edge of the hall, surveying the battlefield at one end. A group of young men, faces scrubbed clean and hair arranged with a determination bordering on madness, cluster together, clutching their velvet doublets like shields. They whisper urgently, shooting hopeful glances across the flagstones, each trying to look casual and failing spectacularly. At the other, a rainbow of ladies in damask and silk huddle together, fans snapping shut in nervous unison, cheeks pink with excitement and dread. Between the two groups lies no man's land, a strip of polished stone, empty, but for the occasional servant hurrying past with a tray of sugared almonds or an abandoned lute. You watch as one brave soul, a boy in boots too large for him, attempts to cross this perilous zone, clutching a sprig of rosemary like a knight going into battle. He stumbles, a giggle ripples through the crowd, and he beats a hasty retreat, face red as the banners overhead. Victory will not come easy tonight. This is the world of courtly love, a place where every look is a chess move, every word a potential scandal, and your chances of success are roughly the same as successfully jousting with a loaf of week-old bread. The rules, oh, there are plenty, and most of them were written by people who'd never actually been in love or out of it. For that matter, rule number 1, never say what you mean, especially if you mean it. Instead, you must communicate in riddles, glances, and the occasional cryptic poem slipped beneath a goblet, if your beloved guesses the meaning. Congratulations, you're halfway to being allowed to hold hands next Lent. Rule number 2, suffering is mandatory. If you're happy, you're doing it wrong, you must pine, sigh, write melancholy verses by the light of the moon, and make sure everyone knows just how dramatically tragic your love life is. Bonus points if you can quote Ovid while looking forlorn. You glance around for a safe corner, but there are none. You are in the court of love, and everyone is a potential player, willing or not. The noble lords and ladies, their sleeves trailing like banners, lounge on cushioned benches, trading half compliments and pointed silences. In the corner, an old troubadour tunes his lute, preparing for yet another ballad about a knight who fell in love with the duke's daughter, lost her to a tournament, and spent the next decade writing poems about her ankle. There is a particular energy here, a blend of hope, terror, and very itchy clothing. Courtly love is, at heart, an endless performance. Every gesture must be calculated, every sigh precisely timed. When a young lady lets her glove drop, it isn't an accident, it's a test. Will anyone notice? Will the right person return it? Will her chaperone see and declare her reputation ruined for eternity? The tension could snap a harp string. You try to blend in, clutching a cup of watered wine and hoping no one asks you to improvise a love sonnet. Around you, conversations spiral in careful circles. Did you see Lord Geoffrey's eyes tonight? They are quite as blue as the banners above. I heard Lady Alice embroidered her sleeves with the symbols of true fidelity, though. Between you and me, she'd lose a duel with a daffodil. Nothing is ever said directly. Nothing is ever simple. You catch the eye of a girl sitting near the dais, her hair braided with ribbons, a sly smile curving her lips. She raises one eyebrow, a signal, perhaps. Or maybe just a twitch, and you feel your heart leap in your chest like a startled hare. Do you approach? What if she's just smirking at the jester behind you? In courtly love, uncertainty is the only guarantee. Now comes the music. A slow, plaintive tune, the kind that makes you want to write letters you'll never send and gaze longingly out the window at clouds. A pair of dancers step onto the floor, hands barely touching, eyes locked with the intensity of people pretending not to care who's watching. You notice how their shadows dance too, flickering in the candlelight, entwined and parting, coming together again, a metaphor, if ever there was one, for the endless push and pull of longing. Every so often, a letter changes hands pressed into a palm, tucked into a sleeve, hidden beneath a plate of sugared plums. Love notes here are minor works of art carefully penned, sprinkled with rosewater, full of hopeless metaphors about wounded hearts and burning devotion. Occasionally, a clever scribe slips in a joke. My love for you burns hotter than last week's mustard, and if the recipient laughs, that's a victory greater than any won on the battlefield. There are chaperones everywhere, stern aunts, suspicious uncles, even the occasional grandmother who hasn't slept since Epiphany. Their job is to ensure that no one gets too close, too soon, or too obviously. You can almost hear the mental tally of possible scandals being calculated with every exchanged glance. You watch as a knight in silvered mail, his hair painstakingly curled, drops to one knee before a lady, offering her a single, trembling rose. The hall holds its breath. She accepts, her fingers brushing his ever so lightly. And somewhere, a choir of angels probably marks a point in the grand ledger of love. Or maybe it's just the minstrel sighing behind you. But for every romance that blossoms, there are 3 that wilt sunk by shyness, torpedoed by a mistimed word, or simply lost in the fog of rumor. That's the real secret of courtly love. It's as much about the thrill of longing as it is about actual togetherness. In a world where marriage is arranged and love is a dangerous luxury, sometimes the closest you can get is the memory of a shared dance, the echo of a compliment, the hope that maybe, just maybe, your poem will be read aloud when the fire burns low. And so, as the evening wears on and the candles gutter down, you find yourself standing at the edge of the floor, velvet collar itching, heart racing, dreaming of impossible things. Maybe tomorrow you'll try your luck. Maybe you'll pen a verse, or pick a flower, or risk a glance. For now, though, you watch the dancers, the lovers, the dreamers, and, for just a moment, you're part of the story, caught in the velvet net of longing, hope, and shy, desperate courage. The music fades, the hall quiets. You let yourself breathe. You step out into the chill night air, the last echoes of music fading behind heavy wooden doors. Your skin still tingling with the memory of 100 flickering candles and more than a few longing glances. The feast may be over, but don't let that fool you. This is where the real game begins. Because as any medieval teenager or 20-something, or secretly young at heart matron would tell you, it's after Vespers and before midnight that the boldest hearts sneak out in search of forbidden adventure. Let's be clear, public flirting in the Middle Ages was as risky as juggling flaming torches while blindfolded, except the torches are rumors, and the blindfold is your grandmother's sharp gaze. Everyone knows the church is the social hub, the Sunday catwalk, the original Tinder. You're here not just for the salvation of your soul, but for a glimpse of the tanner's daughter's dimples, or the miller's son's questionably washed curls. If you're lucky, you might even brush hands while reaching for the same hymn book, a scandal in 7 verses and a chorus. You keep to the shadowed edge of the nave, moving quietly, the stone floor cold beneath your worn boots. The church bells echo, tolling like a gentle warning, keep it holy, keep it chaste, or at least keep it subtle. There's a cluster of giggling girls near the font, pretending to examine the faded frescoes, but their eyes are tracking every eligible bachelor who slouches past. Over by the side door, 3 boys have developed a sudden, overwhelming interest in the parish notice board, at least until someone's mother appears and sends them scattering like sparrows. This is where forbidden flirtation thrives, not in grand declarations, but in sly, sideways glances, in the coded language of smiles and dropped ribbons. It's less Romeo and Juliet, more who stole my apple tart and left a daisy in its place. The tension is delicious. Every encounter is both peril and possibility. You slip outside, heart pounding, into the narrow churchyard. The moon hangs low, caught between clouds and the jagged line of the old stone wall. Here, beyond the lantern light, secrets bloom like night flowers. You lean against the cold stone, listening soft footfalls on gravel, a stifled laugh. The unmistakable whisper of two cloaks brushing together. The hedges rustle suspiciously, whether it's young lovers or hedgehogs. Who can say, in medieval villages? Hedgehogs have seen things. Maybe you remember your own first secret note folded 3 times. Passed beneath the market table, written with more hope than grammar. Maybe it was a simple rhyme. Thy eyes outshine the harvest moon. Thy smile doth melt the snow of June. Or maybe, if you're truly unlucky, your note was intercepted by the parish priest. Cue a week of penance and the worst side-eye in recorded history. You live, you learn. Next time, use invisible ink or just write smaller. The best trysts, of course, happen in gardens. Every manor and monastery boasts a walled patch of green, half wild, half tamed, with rose bushes that scratch your shins and bees who couldn't care less about human romance. You duck beneath an archway tangled with honeysuckle, careful not to snag your sleeve. Mending is expensive and you only have 3 shirts. The air here is sweet with crushed herbs, dew, and the faint smoke of last autumn's bonfires. Somewhere, an owl calls a winged chaperone, never sleeping, always judging. In the far corner, beneath a crumbling stone cherub, 2 figures meet. One is wearing a faded green cloak. The other has tucked a posy of violets behind one ear. Their hands fumble together, clumsy and urgent, and you can almost hear the silent calculations. Who might see? How close is the gate? Did anyone feed the geese? Or are they about to honk and ruin everything? But even here, surrounded by petals and darkness, the world is full of spies. The gardener's boy with ears like radar, the cook's daughter who collects secrets like spoons, the watchful cat who will, without fail, yowl at the worst possible moment. Sometimes the best love stories are the ones that never quite happen, interrupted by a dog, a downpour, or the sudden arrival of your beloved's formidable aunt. Of course, the church has thoughts about all this, doesn't it always? Each Sunday, Father Bernard preaches a rousing sermon about the dangers of unlicensed merriment and improper conduct after sunset. But everyone knows that even the saints had their moments, and half the congregation would give their left shoe for a chance at a midnight rendezvous. The church steps themselves cool, mossy, never quite dry, have hosted more whispered promises and stolen kisses than any cathedral altar. You pause, letting the scene unfold. There's a kind of rhythm to it, all the quiet steps, the muffled giggles, the hush when someone approaches. A single, nervous couple might circle the garden wall 3 times, pretending to be searching for lost gloves, each time hoping for a moment alone. Sometimes they get it. Sometimes they just get more exercise than they planned, if your timing is right. You might glimpse a pair of shadows slip out through the wicket gate, careful not to creak the hinges. If you're unlucky, you'll meet a friend or rival doing exactly the same thing, and now you're both in on each other's secrets blackmail. Friendship and awkwardness all rolled into one. Not every love is star-crossed. Sometimes a flirtation lasts only a week, undone by a careless word, or the sudden arrival of a suitor with a better hat. Sometimes, though, it grows clandestine walks, coded tokens, a scrap of lace, a pressed flower, a strand of hair tied with blue thread. You learn the hidden language of glances. A glance at the sundial means I'll wait for you at dusk. A glance at the old yew tree means I'm grounded for a week, send help. This is medieval romance at its most alive, not the grand gestures of courtly love, but the sneaky, hopeful moments stolen in the cracks between chores and curfews, sermons and supper bells. You find yourself rooting for the nervous squire who's brought a wilted bouquet, for the shy milkmaid who keeps her secret tucked in her apron pocket, for the pair who meet, for just a moment, on the wrong side of the garden wall. And sometimes, as the stars wheel overhead, someone is brave enough to leave a token, a sprig of lavender, a lock of hair, a simple, hopeful note. Maybe it's enough, maybe it isn't. But for one breathless moment, the whole world holds its breath. And even the garden seems to lean in, listening for the answer. You linger in the shadows, heart beating in time with the distant bells, knowing that somewhere, out in the labyrinth of moonlit paths and half-seen faces, the story is still unfolding. The air is cold, the stone is damp. But for a moment, just a moment, you are part of the secret. A hush, and breathe. You find yourself wandering through the muddy heart of a medieval town, The sort of place where the air always smells faintly of cheese, wood smoke, and something the baker's dog did behind the mill. It's market day, the week's one true spectacle, when every alley overflows with color, noise, and more suspicious cures than a modern spam folder. Here, between the dried fish and pickled turnips, thrives a black market of love, staffed by the world's first influencers, potion peddlers, charm sellers, and sly-eyed matchmakers who can sell you a hope, a dream, or a night you'll never forget and possibly regret. The crowd pulses around you, a mass of cloaks, muddy boots, and eager whispers. Everywhere you turn, the air hums with expectation. Who loves whom, who wants to, who can't, but wishes they could. You catch the sharp scent of rosemary and mint from a herb stall, where a woman with wrists jangling with amulets claims she can make even the surliest cobbler fall in love with a single look. She winks, missing a tooth, but never a beat. Guaranteed. Or your chicken back, she promises, brandishing a vial of something disturbingly purple. The glass glints. You wonder if you dare. In the next stall, a grinning young man barely older than you, hair sticking out at alarming angles, leans close, looking for a little magic. Are we, maybe a potion for boldness? He slides a small flask across the table, careful not to spill a drop. 3 copper pennies, and you'll have the courage to talk to anyone. You suspect it's mostly wine, but who's counting after all? Half the power of these potions is in the hope you swallow with them. Welcome to the true underworld of medieval romance alchemists with questionable diplomas, village witches with pockets full of secrets, and nuns turned love coaches with more experience than they'll ever admit. Each one claims to hold the secret formula, the shortcut to passion, the antidote to heartbreak, or, at the very least, a cure for the embarrassment of being left alone at every dance. You pause beside an old woman draped in layers of shawls. Her hands are cracked and stained, each finger ringed with herbs, roots, and what might be chicken bones. She offers you a love charm, nothing fancy, just a scrap of ribbon tied with rosemary and a drop of candle wax. For devotion and true heart, she whispers, eyes bright as embers. Tie it under your pillow. If you dream of your beloved, it's fate. If you dream of goats, well, best stick to cheese for a while. This is where science, superstition, and desperation tangle like roots under an old oak. Every village has at least one wise woman or herbalist who dabbles and favors a sachet of dried lavender for longing, a packet of powdered betel for stamina, buyer beware, or a pressed poppy for the courage to confess. The boundaries blur. Is it chemistry, prayer, or placebo? Most villagers don't care. So long as it works, though, some of the side effects become legendary in their own right. Consider the classic medieval love potion a heady brew of honey, wine, and exotic spices. Think cinnamon, ginger, or the always dangerous nutmeg. Sometimes the potion includes more alarming ingredients: crushed rose petals, a feather stolen from a midnight crow, or on very unlucky days a hair from the object of your affection. For true connection, the vendor insists, though the risks of being caught snipping a strand from a baron's daughter are considerable. The flavor is questionable, the effects unpredictable, but the stories. Oh, the stories. Did old man Jeffrey really elope with the candlemaker's wife after a single dose? Did the miller's son truly become irresistible overnight? Or was it just the new doublet? Not all magic is bottled, of course. You drift toward a small gathering near the town well, where a matchmaker reads fortunes in river stones and apple peels. Her voice is low and mesmerizing. Toss your peel over your shoulder and see what letter it forms, she murmurs. That's the first initial of your true love. You try it. The peel lands in the mud, shaped like an indecisive eel. The matchmaker doesn't miss a beat. An S, or maybe an L. So many names to choose from. Fate is full of options, if all else fails. There's the original catfisher, yes. The medieval world had them too, long before anyone invented profile photos or dubious dating apps. Here, it's all about the proxy love letter. Can't get close to your crush, hire a clever scribe or a poetic monk to write on your behalf. He'll stuff your words with moonlight, longing, and the sort of metaphors that could make a stone blush. The recipient swoons, But beware, more than one suitor has fallen for a pen, not a person. Rumor has it, one knight even courted a mystery maiden for 2 years, only to discover she was the butcher's apprentice in disguise, good with a quill, better with a cleaver. But the catfish game can turn darker. There are whispers of desperate souls selling fake tokens, a borrowed brooch, a stolen glove, a scrap of silk from a cloak never worn by its supposed owner. You see a nervous boy, cheeks blazing, clutching a ribbon that he's certain came from the lady of his dreams. The charm seller smiles kindly, but says nothing. Sometimes hope is worth more than truth, at least for a little while. As the day winds down, you watch villagers slip quietly away some clutching bottles, others hiding tokens in their sleeves, a few already grinning with the thrill of imagined romance. The sun sets in a blur of gold and crimson. A final vendor shouts, "Buy now." Before the moon rises, 2 charms for the price of 1. Bring your own hair. Get a free blessing. You wonder, briefly, whether magic is in the potion, the charm, or simply the courage to believe. You leave the market, the night air cool and fragrant, the sounds of laughter fading behind you. You catch a glimpse of a girl tucking a tiny sachet under her apron, a boy tracing a heart in the dust with his toe, and the old potion seller counting coins with a smile as sly as the new moon. Here, at the crossroads of hope and cunning, love is always for sale, if not for keeps, at least for a night. And as you step into the darkness, you realize the greatest potion is sometimes just a story, whispered between friends, passed hand to hand until it glows with possibility. A hush, and breathe. You find yourself standing in the shadowed nave of a medieval church, just as vespers begin to wind their way through the air like incense and gossip. Candles flicker, shoes squeak softly against ancient stone, and above it all, rising like a second, secret liturgy is the humming, nervous energy of the world's oldest game, the chase. Not the fox and hound kind, but the other one, the one played with eyes, silence, and, for the truly reckless, a badly folded letter tucked beneath a sleeve. Around you. It's a living play of stolen glances and subtle signals. The daughter of the miller dares a peek over her hymn book, all shy lashes and quick blushes, only to meet the eyes of the apprentice mason, who is currently pretending he can read Latin. He cannot. The only thing he can recite by heart is the price of barley and the best route to the bakery. You notice the whole church seems in on it, except maybe the priest, but you can't be sure. Who knows what priests see when they're staring at a congregation full of squirming, hopeful, yearning faces? In the medieval world, you see, the art of courtship was less a sprint and more an elaborate dance, one with more rules than chess, and at least as many consequences. The word dating doesn't exist, but that doesn't mean people aren't desperate for connection. They just have to work harder and subtler for every inch of progress. You realize suddenly you are not here for vespers. You are here to witness the chase, the first move, the look. It's never direct, never too bold, and always delivered with the casual grace of someone who absolutely did not plan it in front of the mirror at home. Eyes meet just for a second, then slide away, as if embarrassed by their own daring. No one speaks. Words are for fools and poets. In the medieval world, a well-timed look is worth 100 awkward confessions. If the glance is returned, the next step is the approach. This rarely means actually approaching, heaven forbid. That's how rumors are born. Instead, it's all about choreography, lingering near the same well, joining the same spinning circle at the harvest dance, conveniently finding yourself side by side at the feast when the roasted pig finally appears. Hands brush by accident, sleeves get caught on belt buckles, a smile slips out, and then vanishes. Of course, it's not always this gentle. Sometimes the chase is more like a siege. You see a young nobleman, cheeks pinker than his surcoat, loitering suspiciously near the church steps. He is waiting for a certain someone to leave vespers. His mother watches from a safe distance, clutching a string of worry beads and muttering prayers that this time her son will manage not to trip over his own boots. Meanwhile, in the back pews, a pair of giggling girls conspire. They pass a note, a real, honest-to-goodness love letter, folded so many times it looks more like a pastry than a message. This is where things get tricky, because in medieval society, letters are as risky as fire in a hayloft. If the wrong hands find it, you could be the talk of the village for a month, or worse, sent to live with your aunt in the next shire, where the only eligible bachelor is rumored to have 3 teeth and a fondness for eels. But the letter. Oh, the letter you watch as it slipped from sleeve to sleeve, through a tangle of hands and whispers. Inside, it's probably full of borrowed poetry no one writes original lines who has the time, hopeful riddles, and, if they're bold, a drawing of a heart, anatomically incorrect but emotionally devastating. Not everyone is a letter writer, of course. Some stick to gifts of ribbon, a sprig of rosemary for remembrance, and, incidentally, for not stinking like yesterday's soup, a chicken feather braided into a lock of hair. Each one is laden with more symbolism than a Shakespearean play. The recipient pretends not to notice, but secretly checks that it's still there at least a dozen times an hour. The etiquette of the chase is unspoken, yet ironclad. Rule 1, never be too obvious. Obviousness is the death of all intrigue, and, frankly, the fastest way to get your heart handed back to you with a polite but chilly, God be with you. Rule 2, always have an escape plan should a parent, guardian, or elderly relative appear. You must be able to pivot from devoted suitor to just happen to be admiring the church architecture in less than 3 seconds. Rule 3, if caught, deny everything. That note. Oh, that's just a recipe for turnip stew. That sprig of rosemary for the family goat. Who has the vapors? Rule 4, if you receive a token or a note, never let your friends see your smile. They will tease you mercilessly, and within hours, the whole village will know you're practically married, and yet, the chase continues. You trail after a pair of lovers as they wind through the market, never touching, never speaking directly, but exchanging a secret language of glances, gestures, and sighs. At the cloth merchant's stall, he selects a blue ribbon, blue loyalty, hope, and also half price that week. She lingers over the apples, pretending not to notice, but she takes the ribbon when he leaves it forgotten on the table. You see her tuck it into her sleeve with a blush that could power the village mill for a week. Sometimes the chase goes wrong, spectacularly so, like the time old Marjorie's goat ate a love letter meant for the baker's daughter, and the resulting confession was later discovered in a very awkward pile of manure. Or when a shy apprentice tried to serenade his beloved under her window and was rewarded not with her hand, but with her grandmother's chamber pot, upended from above. But these are the risks. In a world where parents arrange marriages for land, cows, and the occasional strategic truce, the chase is a rebellion, a claim to a few stolen moments of choice, of laughter, of fluttering hearts. Even the sternest mothers remember their own chases, if only late at night, in the dark. When the fire is low and the house is quiet, the church bells toll, and the crowd scatters. You walk out into the soft dusk, the air alive with secrets and hope. Somewhere, a girl tugs a blue ribbon tighter on her wrist. A boy reads and rereads the recipe for turnip stew, eyes shining with something that looks a lot like joy. You realize the chase never truly ends. It just changes shape, moving from glances to smiles to letters to dances. A dance older than any law or sermon, and for one heartbeat. As you linger in the village square, you feel the whole world poised between what is and what could be. A hush and breathe. You find yourself wandering down a torch-lit street, the air thick with the perfume of last night's spilled ale, wood smoke, and somewhere beneath it all, a trace of something sweeter, something like mischief or regret. It's late, and the village is quiet, except for the distant sound of laughter leaking from the tavern, and the not-so-distant sound of 2 people whispering beneath the eaves. If you listen closely, you can hear the rhythms of medieval courtship and, just as importantly, the clanking chains of its chaperones. This is not a world where you can simply swipe right or meet someone at the market and wander off into the sunset. No. Here, love is policed by church bells, town gossips, and most menacingly, the local parish priest, who seems to have a sixth sense for spotting forbidden flirts. If there were ever an Olympic medal for accidentally appearing at the wrong place at exactly the right time, the village priest would be a perennial gold medalist. He is everywhere and nowhere, drifting like a holy fog, ready to snuff out romance with a single stern glance. Tonight. You're privy to a scene that plays out again and again, in villages and cities from Kent to Krakow. There, beneath the slanting shadows of a bakery's shuttered window, a young couple stands close, but never touching. His hand fiddles nervously with his cap, her fingers toy with the edge of her apron. They are speaking in that peculiar dialect of half-finished sentences, sideways glances, and giggles that only two people on the verge of breaking the rules can truly master. Suddenly, a third figure materializes. You don't see where she comes from. Perhaps she steps straight out of the gloom. Or maybe she was crouched behind a water barrel the whole time, but she appears with the inevitability of taxes or rain on laundry day. She is the chaperone, the self-appointed guardian of virtue, and her name is whispered in dread among the village's would-be Romeos and Juliets. If you're picturing a kindly old grandmother, knitting while she hums lullabies, think again. The medieval chaperone is a force of nature, equal parts nosy aunt, town crier, and private investigator. Sometimes she's an older sister gleeful at the chance to wield power. Sometimes a mother wielding a wooden spoon and a stare that could crack walnuts. Sometimes the local busybody, who has made a lifelong vocation of being precisely where she is not wanted. And what is her task? Simple: to make sure that nothing more exciting than conversation, and preferably conversation about the weather or crop, yields ever passes between two young people. In theory, she is here to protect reputations, preserve honor, and ensure that no one gets swept away by the moment. In practice, she is here to ruin the mood. You watch as the couple tries valiantly to maintain their flow. The young man attempts a compliment. Your eyes are brighter than the village lanterns, and, less smoky. The chaperone interrupts to remark that last week's lanterns were quite bright. Actually, and that nobody needs to be up this late unless they're milking a cow. The girl tries a laugh, which is quickly squashed by a warning glare. The only thing more powerful than a medieval chaperone's shush is the threat that she might start telling your parents what you meant to say. This is the medieval third wheeler, the original anti-wingman. She moves with silent efficiency, always managing to insert herself just as hands might brush, or a compliment might veer dangerously close to poetry. She is so effective, in fact, that sometimes couples are forced to communicate in code-dropping cryptic hints about the weather. It looks like rain, unless the wind changes, or speaking in riddles about goats and geese that, if translated, would make a troubadour blush. But it's not just the chaperone you have to watch out for. The church itself is ever vigilant, its warnings echoing from the pulpit in a rolling tide of thou shalt nots and dire predictions about the wages of sin. Sunday sermons sometimes sound less like spiritual nourishment and more like an exhaustive list of things you absolutely must not do near, or with anyone you fancy. Woe betide the maiden who lingers after sundown, for the shadows are long and temptation is near. And woe betide the youth who dares bring flowers that are not for his mother. Yet, despite all these obstacles, young lovers persist. They are creative. These medieval romantics, when the church and the chaperone conspire to make meetings impossible. The couples develop a kind of stealth. You see it in the way they slip out early to fetch water at the same time, naturally, or how the market suddenly becomes very interesting just as the other arrives, leading to 15 minutes of intense negotiation over turnips that neither intends to buy. There are even stories, whispered late at night, about more daring escapes, of ladders placed beneath windows though, usually. These lead only to a scolding and a swift kick, of coded messages hidden in loaves of bread, or carried by loyal dogs with ribbons tied to their collars, of moonlit trysts in the meadows always risky, always watched for, and always, somehow, worth the risk. Of course, not every attempt is a success. For every legend of true love triumphing over adversity, there are 10 tales of mortifying failure. You hear about the time young Thomas tried to serenade his sweetheart, but forgot that her father was the town's best archer, or when Mary tried to send a secret note with a goose, only to have the goose wander into the tavern and deliver her, "My heart burns for you" confession to the baker, who hasn't stopped blushing since. And let's not forget the village gossips, Who can spin a simple glance into a marriage proposal and a single dropped handkerchief into a full-blown scandal? They are the social media of their day, broadcasting every mishap and minor romance until everyone knows or thinks they know what happened in the shadow of the bakery. It is all deeply unfair, of course, and you sense the longing, the frustration, the bursts of laughter that come when two people manage, even for a moment, to slip past the net of watchful eyes and whisper something true. You realize the church, the chaperone, and the gossips are not just obstacles, they are also, in a strange way, part of the game. They make every meeting, every stolen smile, every brush of fingers infinitely more valuable. The risk makes the moment tonight. As you turn away from the village square and the soft clucking of chaperones shepherding everyone home, you realize that medieval romance is not just a private thing. It's a public sport, a communal spectacle, the forbidden flirt, the warning sermon, the third wheeler's interference, all of them weave together into a tapestry of desire and defiance. And as the church bells toll midnight and the last candle flickers out, you hear just faintly a giggle in the dark, a footstep running home, a heart beating a little faster for having tried. Another round of the oldest game in the world, played beneath the ever-watchful eyes of church, chaperone and chance, a hush and breathe. Step into the long shadow of the great hall, its timbered beams catching the last shreds of daylight, torches guttering along the stone walls, the air thick with the clatter of spoons, the greasy perfume of roasting meat, and the unmistakable musk of dozens of bodies squeezed together like turnips in a sack. You're not here for a quiet dinner. Oh no, you're here for one of the most treacherous minefields in the medieval dating game, the communal feast and dance. Welcome, traveler, to the medieval equivalent of the awkward high school dance, except with more mud, more ale, and a much higher chance of being pelted with a stray chicken bone if you step on the wrong person's foot. Tonight is the festival of Saint something or other. There's always a saint to blame for a party. Every villager who owns more than one shirt is wearing both of them. The tables creak under the weight of bread, cheese, and questionable pies at the far end. The local fiddler is tuning an instrument that may or may not double as a weapon. The candles flicker, casting shadows so lively you almost mistake them for guests. And you, my friend, are about to discover just how badly things can go when love, hunger, and public humiliation mix. You find a seat next to a barrel-chested farmer with hands like hams and a smile as wide as the river. His wife winks at you, perhaps mistaking you for a visiting relative, or perhaps simply pleased to see a new face. In the medieval village, everyone knows everyone. And that means everyone knows everyone's business, including who has a secret crush on whom, who has been seen lingering at the well, and who, last spring, accidentally set their own breeches on fire at this very feast. Nothing is forgotten. Everything is remembered, especially the embarrassing bits. As the meal begins, you realize that a medieval feast is less a meal than a prolonged test of survival. The bread is hard enough to chip a tooth, the cheese suspiciously fragrant, and the meat is either overcooked to the point of charcoal or so rare it's still mooing. But no one seems to care. The ale flows freely, tongues loosen, and the laughter swells until the walls themselves seem to hum with it. You look around and spot her, the girl in the blue kirtle, cheeks flushed from the heat, hair shining in the torchlight. Or maybe it's him, the lad with a crooked grin and a shock of unruly hair, nervously fiddling with a cup. Either way, the dance of glances has begun. As ancient as the stones beneath your feet, you steal a look. They look away. You look away. They look back. By the end of this exchange, your neck hurts and your confidence is somewhere beneath the table, hiding next to a runaway chicken. Suddenly, the music starts, if music is the right word for what happens when a bagpipe, a fiddle, and a drum all try to outshout each other. The room erupts. Everyone is up, dragging anyone within arm's reach onto the floor. No one escapes, not even the village priest, who claims to have a bad hip but is spotted moments later spinning like a dervish with the baker's wife. You are shoved into a circle, handed a partner by a giggling grandmother who gives you a look that says, "No pressure, but don't ruin this. Now." Here's where medieval dating gets creative. There are no slow dances, no chance to whisper sweet nothings in a lover's ear. Instead, there's the galliard, the carol, and a dozen other steps designed by people who clearly enjoyed watching others trip over their own feet. The dances are fast, dizzying, and, let's be honest, a little dangerous if you're lucky. You only spin yourself into a wall. If you're unlucky, you find yourself face down in the rushes, while everyone claps and someone suggests you become a monk. Yet there's something infectious in the chaos. The music, the laughter, the slap of bare feet on dirt, the swirl of skirts and cloaks. It's impossible not to smile, even as you desperately try to remember which way is Widdershins and whether you're supposed to bow or curtsy at the end. The older folks, who have been through dozens of these feasts, cheer you on or shout helpful advice, most of it useless. Lead with your left, someone yells, just as the dance calls for your right. A little boy sneaks underfoot, and you nearly send him flying. He giggles. You apologize. His mother laughs and hands you a cup of cider. Your partner grins at you, perhaps out of sympathy, perhaps out of sheer delight at watching you blunder through the steps. Either way, you find yourself laughing too, and for a moment. The world shrinks to the space between two awkward, hopeful dancers. The song ends with a riot of applause, a bow, and a chance to breathe until someone shouts. Again, and the whole ordeal repeats, only faster. Between dances, you retreat to the tables, cheeks burning, heart pounding, convinced you've made a fool of yourself. But here's the secret everyone does. That's the point. In a world where chaperones prowl and parents watch like hawks, these communal feasts and dances are the one time when everyone can let down their guard, even if it's just to pick hay out of their hair. The embarrassment is shared, which makes it easier to bear. The laughter becomes a shield, the music a balm, and amid the chaos, something unexpected happens. You see couples slip away from the noise, finding quiet corners behind barrels or out beneath the stars. A girl passes a boy a flower, and he tucks it behind his ear, grinning like he's won the harvest lottery. An old man tells a story about how he met his wife at a feast just like this, and how he tripped so badly she laughed for a week and then agreed to marry him. The lesson is clear: public humiliation is just a prelude to romance, a rite of passage for the lovesick. As the night deepens, the hall grows warmer, the music slower, the laughter softer. The bravest, or perhaps the most foolish, stand on tables and sing badly. Someone starts a game of riddles, and a girl challenges a boy to match her wit. The losers must fetch more ale, or worse, sing a verse in front of everyone. You are cajoled into joining, your shyness swept away by the collective goodwill of 100 fellow villagers who have all, at one time or another, made fools of themselves in pursuit of love. When you finally stumble out into the cool night air, your hair wild, your feet sore, your pride battered but intact, you realize that this is what it means to court in the medieval world. Not secret letters or candlelit promises, but the courage to laugh at yourself, to risk embarrassment, to try and fail and try again, to dance badly, sing loudly, and hope that someone, maybe the one you came here hoping to impress, remembers the way you smiled, not the way you stumbled. The torches gutter in the wind, the last song fades into memory, the feast is over. But the story lingers one more night, one more chance, one more foolish, wonderful step in the dance of love. A hush, and breathe. Step with me now out of the riotous noise of the feast hall and into the softer, shivering world beyond the place where the shadows linger, thick along the hedgerows, and the wind seems to murmur secrets through the wild thyme and nettles. Here, under the battered moon and the slow blink of stars, you find yourself on a winding village lane, clutching a very particular, very suspicious little token, a love charm. Or at least what passes for one in a world where science is just a rumor, and magic is the only explanation for why your heart keeps skipping like a stone across a pond whenever she smiles at you. There is something deliciously ridiculous about the medieval obsession with love charms and tokens. And yet, when you slide your fingers into your pocket and touch the smooth, cool shape of a pebble, or the twisted scrap of red ribbon, or that one feather you're convinced fell from the wing of a nightingale suddenly, you feel braver, luckier, just a little less doomed. Maybe it's the placebo effect, or maybe it's centuries of tradition whispering that you'd be a fool not to hedge your bets with a little hedge witch magic. After all, if true love is a battlefield, shouldn't you bring some weapons? However improbable you remember the village wise woman, yes, her house is the one with the sagging thatch and the suspiciously healthy herb garden out back who, for the price of a loaf of bread or a pinch of salt, will sell you a love filter guaranteed to make your intended fall hopelessly. Head over heels for you. She calls it potion. But it smells suspiciously of turnips and tastes like regret. Still, you drink. Because hope springs eternal, especially after 3 cups of mead. The wise woman, of course, insists the effects are subtle. It won't make 'em love you, but it'll make 'em notice you, which is half the battle. You suspect she says this to cover herself legally, or whatever passes for legal in a place where the only court is presided over by a chicken, in the bright, honest daylight. You'd scoff, but under the sly moon, you tuck a little posy of rosemary and thyme into your sleeve, just as your grandmother told you. Rosemary for remembrance, thyme for courage, parsley for fresh breath, she always said, winking as if she'd invented love herself. And then there's the bit of blue ribbon, for luck, and the shiny coin, your last one. But what's a little poverty compared to the possibility of passion? You aren't alone in this, by the way. Across the centuries, heartsick boys and girls, lonely widows and nervous bachelors. Everyone from peasant to prince has tried to tip the scales with a trinket or two. The English called it trow the tokens, tiny keepsakes exchanged in secret, pressed into a palm after a stolen kiss behind the granary, or tucked into the bodice of a gown before the May Day dance. A single glove, a favor tied to a knight's lance, a locket of hair twisted around a scrap of parchment. Every love story, it seems, needs a physical anchor, some little object to keep the feeling from floating away. Of course, not every token is made for sweetness. There are the love knot scraps of red thread tied in complicated patterns, said to bind 2 fates together as tightly as an ox yoke. A hopeful girl might pluck a 4-leaf clover and whisper her crush's name, tucking it under her pillow to dream of his face. A nervous boy, certain he's doomed, might bury a bit of apple peel, hoping the first girl who passes by will be the one. If this sounds like nonsense, well, so does most of what happens after midnight in a medieval village. The church, for its part, rolls its eyes officially. Priests thunder from the pulpit about the dangers of superstition, diabolical influence, and the sin of trying to control God's mysterious matchmaking. But if you peek into the vestry after a wedding, you'll find even the holiest cleric tying a ribbon around his favorite psalter. Just for luck, old habits die hard, and when it comes to love, everyone's a little pagan underneath the surface. Some charms are more interactive. There's the ancient art of love divination, which sounds fancy but mostly involves embarrassing yourself in public. You might drop molten lead into a bucket of water and squint at the shapes. Is that a heart, a fish, or the first letter of her name, more commonly? You crack an egg into your ale and hope the yolk floats toward the person you fancy. If it doesn't, well, at least you've ruined your drink, which is almost as memorable as falling in love. Then there are the truly ambitious, those who seek out the wise woman for her binding spell, or the even more dangerous unbinding. Have you ever seen a jealous ex slip a knotted rag under someone's door, or heard of a lovelorn girl who buries a lock of her rival's hair at the crossroads under a full moon? The village may act innocent by daylight, but under the cover of darkness, hearts turn crafty. If you're lucky, your only worry is waking up with chicken feathers in your boots. If you're unlucky, well, don't ask why you keep dreaming of frogs. But even the most skeptical hearts keep a trinket tucked away, a faded handkerchief, a pressed flower, a button from the sleeve of a beloved shirt. These are the true talismans, proof that even in an age when death and taxes are certain, love can still surprise you. They don't always work. Of course, more than one poor soul has watched their token's magic fizzle out by the next market day. But every now and then, a miracle slips through. You find your trinket years later, at the bottom of an old chest, and remember, oh yes, that wild, reckless hope. That time you believed anything was possible. You can almost smell the lavender now, mixed with the sharp tang of iron from an old pin, the earthy breath of time, the faint sweetness of forgotten petals. You hold the token, turn it in your palm, and wonder, was it ever truly magic, or was the magic simply in the giving, the risking, the wish? Maybe that's the real secret, hidden in every charm and trinket, every ribbon and knot. It isn't about tricking fate or bending the will of gods. It's about hope, about wanting so much that you'll try anything, however foolish, to bring another heart close to yours, even for a moment. And if you're caught, red-handed, with parsley in your shoe and rosemary in your hair, just laugh, like your grandmother did, and pretend you meant to be ridiculous all along. The night deepens. The village sleeps. Somewhere, under a haystack, a boy fingers a faded ribbon and whispers a name to the stars. A girl plaits a new love knot, teeth worrying her lower lip, heart leaping at the sound of distant footsteps. The wise woman dreams of roses. The priest ties another ribbon. The old cat purrs and blinks at the moon. Magic, after all, is just another word for longing. A hush and breathe. If you think your modern crush is complicated, agonizing over the right emoji, triple-checking the wording of a late-night DM, sweating bullets over a 1-minute reply delay, welcome to the glorious agony of medieval messaging, where even saying "I like you" was an adventure involving ink-stained fingers, secret handoffs, coded verses, and, if you were unlucky, a visit from the village priest asking just why you're exchanging love poems with the blacksmith's daughter by moonlight. Let's set the scene. It's midnight. Rain taps at the shutters, and somewhere a goose honks in the dark, possibly as a warning, or possibly just because it's a goose, in a tiny room lit by the feeble glow of a rushlight. You're hunched over a scrap of parchment, tongue caught between your teeth, quill poised like a weapon of the heart. You're composing a love letter. Your hand trembles because vellum isn't cheap, ink is precious, and your schooling consisted mostly of learning how to sign your name and maybe draw a fish. But tonight, none of that matters. You want to say something beautiful, something unforgettable, something that will make her eyes light up like the candles on the altar at Christmas Mass. So, you borrow a line from a traveling minstrel's song, pinch a proverb from your grandmother, and toss in a metaphor about the moon because, honestly, everything in medieval poetry was about the moon, the rose, or the pain of unrequited love, usually all three in one stanza. You write "my heart," like the lone candle, burns for thee. Then you cross it out. Too desperate. You try again. Thy hair is a river of gold. And stop. Remembering she's a brunette and also has a very sharp tongue. Finally, you scrawl something like, "The sky is dark, but I think of you, and it's brighter than the fire." Good enough? Besides, you're out of ink and patience. But writing is only the beginning. Now, you have to deliver your message without anyone seeing. Here, the real sport begins because medieval lovers were basically the original spies. You can't just slide into someone's DMs. You have to slide your letter under a barn door, or tuck it into the hollow of an ancient oak, or hand it to your most trustworthy, read-gullible little cousin and swear him to secrecy. Of course, nothing is ever truly secret in a village where even the cows seem to gossip. And within hours, 3 grandmothers, the baker, and possibly the mayor's horse all know you've sent a missive of passion to Lady Matilda. If your intended is highborn, things get trickier. There are rules actual, terrifying, written in Latin rules about what a lady can receive and from whom. Her maidservants watch her like hawks. Her mother intercepts anything that looks like it might contain poetry. And her father considers crossbow practice an acceptable response to unsolicited mail. You must get creative. Maybe you bribe the kitchen boy with half your week's wages to slip your note into a basket of apples. Maybe you trust the nunnery cat, who, for reasons unknown, seems to appear in all the right places at all the right times. Sometimes you turn to code because medievals loved nothing more than making things complicated. Your letter is written in simple Latin or French, but every third word is swapped for a flower name. Or you use an acrostic, where the first letter of each line spells "am or not subtle." But hey, it worked for Chaucer, if you're truly bold. You might write your message in lemon juice, the original invisible ink. Just pray your beloved knows to hold it over a candle and not toss it in the stew. And then there's poetry. Oh, the poetry. If you think bad love poems are a modern affliction, just wait until you read the odes penned by medieval teenagers. There are ballads so tortured, so overwrought, they could wilt an entire rose garden. Thou art my sun, my stars, my only hope in this cruel world. And, on the back, P.S. Didst thou receive my last letter? If not, it was the goat's fault. Love letters weren't always words, either. Sometimes a pressed flower, a lock of hair, a scrap of lace, or even a piece of bread in the shape of a heart, a little moldy. But it's the thought that counts did the trick. Each gift was a message in itself. I remember you. I risked everything for you. I raided my father's pantry for you and possibly angered a very large pig. But beware, love letters can backfire. In one particularly juicy village legend, a love note went astray, only to be found by the recipient's older brother, who proceeded to read it aloud at the next market day. The poor author spent the summer hiding in the hayloft and seriously reconsidering his poetic ambitions. In another case, two letters crossed paths, resulting in a bizarre love quadrangle, a broken lute, and a new law about mailboxes or the lack thereof. And yet, for all the risk and embarrassment, these letters, tokens, and whispered codes were the lifeblood of medieval romance. Each scrap of parchment carried a universe of hope and worry, a secret that fluttered in the dark like a moth drawn to the tiniest flame. The mere act of writing careful, painstaking, full of spelling errors and wild, beautiful metaphors was a spell, a tiny rebellion against loneliness. Now, imagine you've sent your letter, and you wait. Every day, you look for a sign, a nod, a smile, a wild rose on your doorstep, a loaf of bread suspiciously shaped like a heart. Weeks pass, you almost give up hope. And then, one day, tucked beneath your dinner plate, you find a tiny slip of parchment. 3 words: I saw you. It's not Shakespeare, but your heart does a backflip. You've been noticed. The code has worked. Medieval messaging was never about perfection. It was about risk. The risk of being misunderstood, or laughed at, or falling hopelessly. Deliciously in love with someone who just might write back. And so, you write again. And again. Sending tiny pieces of your heart into the unknown. Trusting that somewhere out there, someone is waiting to read them. And maybe, just maybe answer in kind. A hush. And breathe. You wake beneath the low-timbered ceiling of a stone hall, wrapped in blankets that itch like a penance, listening to the dawn bells toll, and somewhere over the cheerful racket of poultry and the sigh of the stable boy mucking out straw, you hear the faint twang of a lute. There's already a whiff of roasting onions, stale ale, and possibly the faintest trace of horse sweat lingering in the air. Welcome to the castle home to 100 rules, 1,000 secrets, and more high-maintenance crushes than a modern group chat. But don't get too comfortable. Today isn't just about chores or running errands for Lady Marjorie's latest embroidery emergency. Today is about love, or, at least, something that the minstrels and poets insist is love, though it looks suspiciously like a medieval combination of Olympic sport, improv theater, and competitive karaoke. You make your way to the Great Hall, heart pounding. The walls are hung with faded tapestries. Half the knights are nursing hangovers, and everyone is whispering about the upcoming tournament, for most. The event is about swords, horses, and bruised egos, but for a select, slightly delusional breed of noble. The tournament is a stage, a place to win, not just glory, but the temporary devotion of a lady watching from the gallery. This, dear traveler, is courtly love, or, as it's known to historians, the greatest drama never to make it onto Netflix. Let's set the scene: a knight in shimmering, slightly muddy armor Sir Geoffrey the Red. Let's say has spent all week composing a poem so tortured that it makes your average pop breakup song sound like a weather report. He recites it with a face so solemn you'd think he was delivering news of the king's death. All this, just to catch the eye of Lady Isabeau, who sits above him, pretending not to notice but secretly ranking the contenders by the shininess of their helmets and the size of their war horses. Courtly love is a game, and everyone plays their part. The knight must be brave, but not too obvious, bold, but heartbreakingly humble. The lady, for her part, must remain a little distant her favor, a prize to be earned, never simply given. Picture a dance, where each step is a risk, a dropped handkerchief, a glance held a second too long, a flower pressed between pages of a psalter, and all of it must happen under the eyes of a court so gossipy it makes your grandmother's neighborhood look like a monastery. The rules, such as they are both simple and impossible. You cannot declare yourself openly. You must suffer, visibly, but never complain. You can pine, yearn, even faint extra points if you fall artfully across the tilt yard. But you cannot, under any circumstances, suggest that your love might be reciprocated. That would ruin the game, because in this world, unrequited longing is the main event. And the grand prize isn't a wedding or even a kiss, it's a fleeting glance, a single smile, the thrill of being seen. And so, the day begins. The knight's parade before the stands, banners flying, armor glinting, horses snorting with barely contained indignation. Each knight wears a token, perhaps a lady's glove, a scarf, or a ribbon that says, in the wordless language of romance, I am suffering, and it's all her fault. The ladies, of course, pretend not to notice, though the most daring will sneak a wink from behind their veils, which usually sends the knight into either a fit of poetic inspiration or the nearest mud puddle. Tournaments are chaos. Spears splinter, shields fly, and more than one squire ends the day with a concussion and a story that will only grow more heroic in the retelling. But beneath the dust and bravado, the real action is happening in the stands. Here, alliances are forged and broken with a single whispered comment. Here, mothers plot futures and daughters plot escapes. And all the while, the troubadours' medieval hype men strum lutes and sing ballads about love so pure, so tragic. It could curdle cream, yet, for all the spectacle, courtly love is mostly a test of patience and emotional endurance. You will spend hours composing riddles, sending cryptic notes, and risking death by parental lecture just to exchange a single glance. You'll dance at feasts, swapping witticisms so barbed that bystanders flinch. You'll write verses, fold them into impossible origami, and bribe the kitchen boy to deliver them again. Kitchen boys always know too much. If you're lucky, you'll receive a reply, a pressed flower, a coy riddle, maybe a line of poetry that makes no sense but sets your heart racing anyway. But beware, the line between devotion and disaster is perilously thin. If you're too obvious, you risk being called forward to explain yourself before a council of stern-faced relatives who treat romance as a kind of contagious illness. If you're too subtle, your love might end up marrying someone else entirely, someone with better lands, more sheep, or just a shinier suit of armor. Courtly love is a tightrope, strung between hope and heartbreak, and everyone walks it, laughing and trembling all the way. Let's pause for a moment and talk about the love song, the medieval mixtape. Every evening, the minstrels gather by the fire, spinning tales of doomed lovers and impossible quests. Sometimes, after too much wine, a bold knight will rise to sing a ballad of his own creation. These performances are judged not by skill, but by sincerity. The more pained your expression, the more likely the audience will believe you really are dying for Lady Cecily, even if she's more interested in the roast goose. As the sun sets, the festivities turn dreamy. Candlelight glows on the faces of lovers and liars alike. Some sneak out into the rose gardens for whispered conversations and poorly concealed hand-holding. Others stay at the table, carving their beloved's initials into the wood or, if particularly dramatic, reciting oaths of undying love to a cup of spiced wine. And, as night deepens, you realize the real secret of courtly love. It is both utterly foolish and heartbreakingly beautiful. A dance of words and glances, a sport played not with swords, but with longing, restraint, and just a dash of idiotic bravery. No one expects a happy ending, but for one evening, beneath the stars and the laughter, you can almost believe that a look, a song, a ribbon tied in secret, is enough to keep hope alive. You slip away, heart full, head spinning. Tomorrow, the world returns to its usual chaos. But tonight, for just a moment, you lived inside a poem awkward, overwrought, and shining with impossible dreams. A hush. And breathe. You step out of your thatched cottage at first light, the air so brisk it bites at your cheeks and fills your lungs with the scent of dew and wood smoke. Your boots crunch on frozen earth as you follow the sound of bells and shouts drifting from the heart of the village. Today is not just another day of toil and turnips. Today, the market has come to town, and with it, 1,000 whispered possibilities. Your cloak is the best you own, brushed clean of last week's mud, and you've scrubbed your hands until they almost remember what soap feels like. You take a last nervous glance at your reflection in a puddle, ignoring the goose who's already given you side-eye, and set off, heart quickening with each step. The fair is calling, the world is wide, and somewhere between the stalls and the singing, fate might be plotting to upend your entire romantic status. As you approach, the fields outside the village have transformed overnight. Tents flap like banners in the wind. Merchants bark their wares bright ribbons, rough pots, sweet honey cakes, and if you're feeling particularly reckless, a love potion of dubious legality, brewed by a woman who claims to know 7 ways to snare a husband and at least 3 to get rid of one. The air is thick with aromas roasted meat, mulled cider, damp straw, and a generous side of livestock funk. The entire world has gone technicolor, bursting with hope, noise, and more than a little mud. Here's the thing about medieval fairs, they're chaos, they're opportunity. And if you know how to watch, they're the hottest dating scene for leagues around. Forget lonely hearts columns or right swiping in the dark. In this world, a well-aimed apple, a winning smile, and the stamina to survive a Morris dance can change your destiny faster than you can say, "Blessed be Saint Valentine." Let's start with the food. Everywhere, there are tables groaning under the weight of pies, puddings, roasted fowl, and bread so fresh it steams in the morning chill. You catch the eye of a girl across the way, her hair caught up in a scarf the color of July hay, hands dusted with flour, laughter spilling like music as she bargains for a string of sausages. If you're feeling bold, you edge closer, toss out a compliment about her bargaining skills, and hope she doesn't notice your ears turning red. You're not alone in your mission. The entire village, and half the next one over, has turned out in their finest, by which you mean clean shirts and cloaks not actively crawling with fleas. There's an unspoken dance at work, a choreography everyone seems to know who stands where, who nods, who dares the first greeting. It's a swirling current of glances, touches, and the kind of banter that could mean everything or nothing at all. If you thought medieval dating was a staid, solemn affair, think again. These fairs are where the boundaries blur, where the rules, at least for a day, are just a little more forgiving. Unmarried boys and girls cluster in groups, whispering, plotting, shoving each other with the subtlety of oxen in a turnip patch. Mothers lurk nearby, pretending to shop while evaluating potential sons or daughters-in-law with a gaze that could curdle cream. Fathers drink ale, swap stories, and pretend not to notice the game afoot, though they'll be the first to grumble if anything gets out of hand. The games begin early, tossing rings at bottles, racing pigs, wrestling matches that end in laughter, and occasionally, bruises to both pride and posterior. If you want to impress someone, now's your chance. Show off your aim with a bow, your strength at the tug of war, your agility on the maypole. Every triumph is a feather in your cap. Every stumble a story to be retold and mercilessly exaggerated for years to come. Then there's the dancing. As the sun climbs higher, musicians tune fiddles and pipes, calling everyone old, young, bold, and bashful to the village green. The music is wild, infectious, the kind that sets your blood singing. Hands meet, spin, let go. You find yourself laughing with someone whose name you barely know, caught in a whirl of skirts, dust, and wild possibility. For a moment, you're lighter than air. All worries vanished. It's in this tangle of limbs and laughter that the bravest offers are made of flour tucked behind an ear. A whispered invitation to walk together at dusk. But beware in the market's madness. Hearts are as likely to be broken as one. There are rivalries, jealousies, and more than a few sly tricks. Some girls will challenge suitors to riddles or say feats of wit. Some boys, emboldened by cider, will attempt feats of strength that end in splinters and apologies. There's always the village gossip, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, lurking to catch any sign of impropriety. One wrong word, and you'll be the subject of next Sunday's sermon. As dusk falls, the energy shifts. Couples slip away from the noise, finding quiet corners under ancient oaks or beside the gently flowing stream. Here, words soften, glances linger. If fortune smiles, a hand is clasped, a promise whispered, a heart secretly claimed. These are the moments that last, that echo long after the tents are packed away and the market green returns to silence. And when the fair is over, when the songs have faded, the stalls stand empty, and the world smells once again of damp earth and wood smoke. You walk home under a sky thick with stars. Maybe you carry a new token, a ribbon, or a smile. Maybe you walk with someone at your side, or with a hope blooming stubborn as a dandelion in spring. The feast, the fair, the dance, all of it is memory now, sweet and aching as the last note of a love song played in the dark. A hush, and breathe. You are standing at the edge of a spring meadow, a light drizzle soaking the world in that fresh, earthy perfume that makes everything feel just a bit more alive. Your cloak, still damp from the morning, clings stubbornly to your elbows as you watch two figures just beyond the tangle of hawthorn and wild roses. They could be anyone peasant, squire, merchant's daughter, or an apprentice who smells faintly of sheep, but their body language gives them away. This is no ordinary chat about pig prices. This, friend, is a medieval flirtation in full bloom. Let's admit it, you might think yourself fluent in emojis, GIFs, or the gentle art of sending a meme at precisely 2:03 a.m. to test the waters. But here, in the age of mud and miracles, the language of love is far more botanical and occasionally ornithological. Every flower tucked behind an ear, every feather tied into a braid, every scrap of hand-embroidered ribbon is loaded with meaning, dangerous, delightful, and, if you're not careful, deeply embarrassing. See that young man holding a single red carnation, not just a pretty bloom. In the medieval love lexicon, it means, "My heart burns for you," which is a little dramatic, considering he's mostly just hoping she'll say yes to a walk around the duck pond. If he'd plucked a daisy, it would be innocence, the floral equivalent of, "Hey, I'm nice. Please don't tell your mother I tried to steal a kiss." A thistle. Now, that's a different message. Love hurts, but hey, at least you'll remember me every time you sit down. You wander closer, feeling the grass wet beneath your boots, and hear the low hum of voices drifting on the breeze. Listen in, and you'll catch a conversation that would make any modern dating app user cringe and grin in equal measure. Fair maid, you are as radiant as the midsummer sun. He tries, all eager eyes and sweaty palms. She snorts, unimpressed. So, I'll burn your nose and make you sneeze. Medieval girls do not play. He rallies. If I had but a feather from the tail of the Lord's peacock, I'd gift it to you, so you'd know how proud my heart is in your presence. She eyes him. And if I had a feather from a goose, I'd tickle you into running home to your mother. Feathers, in case you wondered, are a whole separate code. Peacock feathers mean pride, good or bad, depending on whether your would-be beloved finds cockiness charming or just wants to chase you out of town. Goose feathers, foolery and fun, often used to tease. Swan feathers, with their rare softness, were a pledge of constancy. There's even talk in some villages that if you tie a blackbird feather with a red thread and slip it into someone's shoe, you'll make them dream of you all week. Results may vary. Sometimes the only result is a stinky shoe. Then there are the ribbons. The simplest "I like you" might be a strip of blue or green cloth tied around a wrist, the color depending on local custom. In some places, blue means loyalty, while in others it just means I'm available, but not desperate. Interpret at your own risk. Red, as always, is dangerous, fiery passion, a promise of trouble, or just a declaration that you're a little too enthusiastic at dances. Sometimes, girls would weave herbs into their braids: lavender for luck, rosemary for memory, marjoram if they felt mischievous. Don't even get started on garlic in some regions. It was a charm to ward off both evil spirits and over-eager suitors. Yes, halitosis is a timeless defense. Back to our couple. You watch as she slips a posy of wildflowers into her sleeve, half hiding it if she shows it to him later. That's a yes. If she gives it to the local goat, well, that's a no, and possibly a sign that she prefers cheese to men anyway. And then come the medieval pickup lines, passed down through generations like family curses. Some are surprisingly clever. I would cross the Black Forest in my bare feet just to hold your hand for a moment. A poet might say. Of course, he'd probably last 5 minutes before regretting every decision. Others are just weird. Your eyes are brighter than my best copper pot is only a compliment if you spend your days scrubbing cookware. I'd rather face the Lord's tax collector than a single day without seeing you is bold but risky. Remember, the tax collector carries a stick. Every festival and market brings new chances for coded messages. At May Day, you can leave a garland at your crush's door. On St. Valentine's, a carved wooden heart. If you're handy with a knife and not afraid of splinters, sometimes, all it takes is a wink over a mug of cider, or a handful of strawberries accidentally dropped in the right lap. The bravest souls might even try the classic challenge, a riddle or a rhyme. If you can answer me this, says the would-be lover, then you shall win my ribbon and perhaps my heart. If you fail, well, at least you get a story to tell the hens. But, of course, there are dangers. A wrongly chosen flower, a misunderstood feather, or a pickup line that falls flat can make you the laughingstock of 3 parishes. The village gossip always watching will be ready to pounce, spinning tales faster than you can pluck a daisy. Sometimes, messages are intercepted. That lavender you meant for Maud winds up in old Nan's apron. Now Nan thinks you're after her cider recipe, and Maud thinks you're just another idiot. Still, there's a magic in this awkward, tangled dance, a sense that love, no matter how old the mud on your boots or how patchy your beard, is a thing that must be courted, decoded, risked fair. You see it in the way hands brush in the herb garden, the way eyes meet across the candlelit gloom of the tavern, the way a single buttercup tucked behind an ear can make your heart thump like a festival drum. In the end, you realize nothing has changed all that much. The tools might be different, the lines a bit stranger, but the dream is the same. You want to be seen, to be chosen, to matter, to hear a laugh in answer to your bravest, silliest, most sincere attempts at connection. So, as the sun dips behind the distant hills and the meadow fills with fireflies, you gather your courage and your clumsiest flower bouquet. Maybe this time the message will be clear, or maybe you'll have to learn, like all the awkward lovers before you, that sometimes the only way to say I like you is to say it, as plainly and as bravely as you can, and hope the world, for a moment, understands. A hush, and breathe. You find yourself on the edge of a dark forest just as the mist is rolling in, cold and heavy, brushing over your skin with the insistence of a cat demanding to be fed. Somewhere ahead, lanterns flicker behind the greasy glass windows of a cottage roofed in moss and superstition. The air smells of damp earth, crushed rosemary, and a faint tang of something you can only call witchiness, as if every herbalist and cunning woman for miles has gathered to whisper about your most embarrassing crush. That's right tonight. You're not just wandering the familiar lanes of medieval love. You're plunging into its weird, shadowy back streets, where a little bit of magic is always on offer, for the right price. Because here's a secret that every medieval lover, from blushing dairymaid to brooding knight, knew sometimes flowers and feathers just aren't enough. Sometimes, when you've been friend-zoned for the 3rd feast in a row, or your beloved is suspiciously immune to your best goat-based poetry, you need help, a little nudge from forces unseen. Or, let's be honest, a bubbling cauldron of questionable substances administered by someone with eyebrows that meet in the middle and a mysterious pet ferret. Let's start with the potions. Oh, the potions. Walk into any village on a night thick with stars, and you'll find at least one person trying to peddle a love philter. Some recipes are tame enough rose petals steeped in honey and wine, meant to make the drinker feel all warm and squishy, which is exactly what wine does anyway. Others get creative eye of newt, dust of mandrake root, even the odd bat's wing for boldness. If you thought medieval flirting was risky, try getting your crush to swallow a brew that smells like boiled boots and barnyard. Some formulas were so closely guarded, that the local wise woman might only share them in riddles to win a heart. Mix by moon's third part, herb of rue and thorn apart, whisper thrice and never start, until the owl has sung. What does that mean? No one knows, but somehow every grandmother in the village claims she got her husband that way. But beware, love potions were as likely to get you burned at the stake as they were to win you a date. Church authorities frowned upon meddling with God's plan, especially if your plan involved a little too much belladonna and not enough prayer. Yet, desperate hearts don't care for dogma. There are accounts, some whispered, some hilariously documented in court records, of girls bribing apothecaries for charms to soften a heart, only for the recipient to fall madly in love with the apothecary, the neighbor's goat, or, in one tragicomic case, a statue of Saint Sebastian in the chapel garden. And then there were the charms and amulets, love knots braided from red thread, sachets stuffed with lavender and foxglove, medallions etched with cryptic sigils. Carry this, and you'll find affection. Bury that under your beloved's doorstep, and he'll dream only of you, and maybe of giant turnips, results not guaranteed. Some even went so far as to craft wax figures and prick them gently with pins and acts supposed to inspire longing. Not agony, of course. If your target woke up with mysterious aches, that was just the weather. Now, about those pigeons, in an era without WhatsApp, what's a lovesick soul to do? Send a message by bird. Of course, pigeons carried not just news of battle, but declarations of undying affection, if you were lucky. Your note made it. If not, it might get intercepted by the local lord's kitchen and read aloud for laughs over supper. Humiliating. But at least everyone knows you're passionate. Right. Some tales insist that pigeons, if fed a lover's handkerchief soaked in wine, would circle your crush's house for a week. Science says, probably not, but hope is a powerful thing. And in the Dark Ages, hope often looked like a slightly drunk pigeon. Let's not forget the occult tests for true love, half parlor trick, half serious business. Sleep with a sprig of mugwort under your pillow, and you'll dream of your future spouse. Drop apple peels into a basin of water, and watch for the floating initial. Stand before a mirror at midnight with a candle, and you might catch a glimpse of your beloved's face. Or, if your nerves give out, you'll just see yourself looking like you've made a terrible mistake. Superstition wrapped around every moment, folk belief was a kind of magic everyone practiced, whether or not they admitted it. But not all magic was harmless. There are darker stories, too, of women accused of bewitching men, of bitter rivals sneaking powdered bones or graveyard dust into the evening ale. Sometimes the line between winning his heart and sending him to the next life got a little too thin. Court records, always the juiciest sources, are full of jilted lovers pointing fingers and villagers muttering about evil eye or binding spells. You imagine the atmosphere in those candlelit kitchens, everyone hunched over their bowls, trading tales and side eyes. Yet, for every dark tale, there's a laugh. The stories are legion: the farmhand who spent a month eating only parsley because a fortune teller said it would make him irresistible, the baker who filled every loaf with caraway seeds as a sign of faithfulness, only to discover her husband hated the taste, the noblewoman who wore a garter made of wolf fur because it was said to make men howl for her. No comment. Sometimes, of course, the truest magic was simply boldness, the courage to cross a muddy field and ask for a dance, the willingness to try and fail and try again. The real potion, the lasting amulet, might be nothing more than the willingness to be seen as a fool, to risk rejection, to laugh at yourself and let the world join in. So, as the mist curls closer and the wind sets the lantern swinging, you find yourself back at the edge of that forest, maybe clutching a pouch of dried herbs. Maybe just your own fluttering heart. You know that love, in the end, is always a little occult, a little out of reach, and always worth chasing even if you're helped along by a pigeon, a potion, or the memory of 100 medieval fools who tried before you. You feel the hush like the pause before a spell is spoken, and you breathe. Dawn breaks with all the subtlety of a dropped skillet, and you find yourself blinking in the grayish light that seeps through the crooked shutters of your rented attic room. If last night's adventures were a tapestry of candlelight, hopeful glances, and perhaps a little bit too much mead. This morning is embroidered with less poetic threads aching feet, a suspicious new stain on your only good tunic, and the kind of headache that makes you seriously consider swearing off fermented turnips forever. But there's no time for self-pity. The bells are tolling 6 times, then once more, as if to say, "Get up, you rascal. The world waits for no romantic. You're not the only one emerging, blinking, from the long medieval night, out in the street. The cobblestones are slick with dew and the scent of yesterday's rain, overlaid with the sharper tang of livestock and the sweet, musty perfume of bruised apples and half-rotted hay. If you listen closely, you can hear the first coughs and creaks of the market coming to life, the clop of hooves, the lowing of cattle, the staccato clatter of wooden carts as vendors set up their stalls. Above all, you hear voices, hundreds of them, swelling together in a messy symphony of haggling, joking, and, inevitably, gossip, because in the Middle Ages, the market wasn't just the place to buy turnips and haggle over the price of eels. It was the social engine of the village, the place where news, rumors, confessions, and the fallout from last night's romantic mischief all got wrung out and hung up for public inspection, like laundry on a windy day. If you made a fool of yourself under the harvest moon, rest assured that everyone from the baker's apprentice to the Reeves' gossipy wife will know about it before you finish your morning pottage. You make your way toward the marketplace, feeling the familiar crunch of gravel beneath your boots, and the not-so-familiar flutter of anxiety in your chest. Last night is a blur of half-remembered dance steps, the feel of a warm hand in yours, and perhaps the faint memory of an ill-advised serenade beneath someone's window. Was it Rosalind's, or was it that new girl, the one with the laugh like wind chimes and a mysterious talent for losing at dice? Either way, your singing voice will be a topic of discussion for weeks, if not years. You pass a group of children who giggle behind their hands as you go by. One of them is humming a tune suspiciously like the one you wailed at midnight. At the market, the scene is chaos, but it's a chaos with rules of dance as old as the village itself. Stalls overflow with leeks and cabbages, fish so fresh they still smell of river mud, bundles of herbs tied with scraps of rag, and pastries that might, if you're lucky, actually contain fruit this time. Chickens squabble beneath tables, dogs dart between legs, and somewhere, a rooster perches on a barrel like a feathery herald of public embarrassment. Every face you meet seems to carry the ghost of a grin, and you brace yourself for the onslaught. It begins, as it always does, with the first merchant's greeting cheerful, a little too loud, and utterly loaded. Up early, are you? I heard someone was out serenading the moon last night. Hope she was listening. You grin sheepishly, because denial is futile. The market has ears everywhere, and its memory is long. You buy a loaf of rye bread you don't need just to end the conversation. As you move through the throng, snippets of conversation swirl around you, half heard, half imagined. Did you see them by the well, I'm telling you? She had a rose tucked behind her ear, and it wasn't there at Vespers. That new boy, the one with the crooked nose, swears he saw a ghost at the crossroads, but I think it was just Margaret's mother out looking for her. Gossip is the lifeblood of this place, running thicker than gravy at the Lord's table. In a world with no tabloids or social media, the market is where reputations are made, ruined, or quietly rehabilitated, sometimes all in the same morning. There's a certain ritual to it all. The baker's daughter flirts shamelessly with the blacksmith's apprentice, ignoring the way her mother hovers in the background, all frowns and folded arms. The tanner's wife swaps scandalous tales with the miller's sister, their voices dropping to whispers only when a priest walks by. Head down, pretending not to hear. Old men perch on barrels, swapping stories from their youth, some true, most wildly embellished. Why? In my day, we courted by candlelight. None of this moonlit nonsense. And we didn't need no lutes. You spot a familiar face, your best friend, still a little green around the gills from last night's ale, and clutching a bouquet of wildflowers that looks suspiciously like it was borrowed from the churchyard. For Margaret, he says, sheepish. Do you think she likes daisies? You offer him your best sage advice. She likes anything that isn't stolen. Probably, he snorts, And for a moment, you both watch as the shoemaker's eldest son tries, and fails, to impress a girl by juggling 3 apples and a potato. The apples survive, the potato, not so much. But regret is a fickle thing in the morning light. For every heart that aches, there's another that flutters with possibility. The couple who quarreled by the well last night are now sharing a honey cake, shy smiles blooming in the space where words failed hours before. An older woman, infamous for her sharp tongue, offers you a wink and a pinch of your cheek. Good to see young people still trying. Lord knows, it's not easy. There's forgiveness in the market air, and something else. To the promise of new stories, new scandals, new chances. You wander past a fortune teller's stall, its canvas sides painted with faded stars and moons. She catches your eye, crooks a finger, and before you know it, you're sitting before her, palms outstretched. Her reading is predictably vague love, luck. Maybe a goat in your future, but she slips you a sprig of rosemary for courage, and you tuck it behind your ear, hoping no one notices. And always, the market thrums with the rhythm of daily life. Goods change hands, laughter rises and falls, the scent of frying onions wafts through the air, and somewhere in the background, a lute picks out a tune that sounds suspiciously like the one you sang last night. It's a new day, a new chance to make a fool of yourself, or, just maybe, to get it right. As the sun climbs higher, the gossip softens, the regrets fade, and the story's yours, mine. Everyone's are folded gently away, tucked behind smiles and beneath baskets of greens, ready to be unpacked again at the next feast, the next dance, the next wild, wonderful night, for now. You breathe, and the market exhales with you a hush, a smile, and a promise that love, regret, and laughter are always waiting, just around the next stall. You step into the main square just as the sun begins to crest the church spire, tossing its pale gold across rooftops and chimney pots. And for a fleeting moment, the whole world feels washed clean. But if you thought the dawn could erase every midnight regret and marital spat, think again. Today, as on so many market days before, the air is thick with the promise of something juicier than last week's goose scandal, or, more specifically, the unmistakable aroma of a marriage gone sour. The medieval village may not have reality television, but what it lacks in screens, it more than makes up for in public performance, and nowhere is that truer than when a union starts to unravel. You hear it first before you see it, the sharp snap of a wooden spoon against a table, the rapid-fire muttering of 2 neighbors who are absolutely not gossiping, except that they absolutely are, and the unmistakable tone of the baker's wife, whose voice can slice through fresh bread. Well, she's thrown him out again. That's 3 times since Epiphany. It's not long before you realize that the day's entertainment is unfolding right in the middle of the square, in full view of the fishmonger, the tanner, and, let's be honest, every child within running distance. At the center of it all stand Agnes and Roger, her with her arms crossed so tightly she might snap, him looking as if he'd rather wrestle a wild boar than face her wrath. The town has seen this play out before accusations and counter-accusations, with a side of rolling pins and the occasional threat to sell someone's best goat. This is no private matter in the Middle Ages. Marriage is as much a public contract as a personal promise, and when it collapses, everyone gets front row seats whether they want them or not. You might think divorce was impossible in an age when the church held all the cards. Technically, you'd be right, marriage was supposed to be indissoluble, a holy bond not to be broken by mere mortals. But medieval ingenuity is nothing if not persistent. And where there are unhappy spouses, there's a will, a way, and, frequently, a loophole. Annulments become the medieval equivalent of conscious uncoupling possible. But you'd better have a convincing story. Were you too closely related? Even by the standards of third cousins twice removed, did someone neglect to mention a previous secret engagement, a vow of chastity, or that minor issue with the witch's curse? The local priest has heard it all, and so have your neighbors. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before annulments, there are feuds. And feuds are where medieval relationships truly shine. You see, when love sours in a world without therapists or couples yoga, it gets creative, Some spouses resort to the ancient art of not speaking, which, in a one-room cottage, can last approximately 3 minutes before escalating into a shouting match. Others take their grievances to the church steps, where confessions of laziness, gluttony, or excessive fondness for cider ring out for all to hear. For the especially bold or especially wronged, there's always the market where a well-timed accusation can ruin reputations, faster than a spring storm ruins hay. On market day, the drama plays out in stereo. One corner holds a husband bemoaning his wife's poor housekeeping. She burnt the porridge again, and the cat's got fleas, while another hosts a wife cataloging her husband's failings. He spends more time with his chickens than with me. Children dart between, learning early the dangers of picking sides. If you listen carefully, you might hear the village wise woman offering advice that's half folklore, half sharp observation. Try a nettle under the mattress, dear. If he jumps, at least you'll know he's still alive. Laughter follows, as do the stares. But not every feud is lighthearted. Sometimes, tempers ignite like dry straw. You witness a woman parading her husband's muddy boots through the square, each step a declaration of war. The crowd winces, but no one intervenes. After all, public shaming is an art form here, a performance with rules, expectations, and unspoken applause. There's the flower toss, in which a wrong spouse dumps baking flour or meal over their partner's head. There's the bed airing, where blankets and nightshirts are hung outside with suspicious stains for all to see. And, in the most notorious cases, there's the cucking stool, a medieval device of humiliation, involving a dunk in the village pond for the especially quarrelsome or adulterous. You pass the stocks, currently occupied by a sheep thief. But last week's memory is still fresh, a local couple, both locked in place, forced to work out their differences while the townsfolk offered opinions and occasionally rotten cabbages. Justice is participatory here, and sometimes deeply cathartic, at least for the spectators. In between these public theatrics, there are quieter moments. You notice an old couple, hands weathered, faces lined, sharing a piece of bread on the church steps. Their quarrels, you suspect, are measured in sighs, not shouts. They've survived too many winters together to let a cold shoulder last long. For every public feud, there are dozens of private reconciliations, midnight apologies whispered under blankets, silent gestures of forgiveness, loaves of bread left on doorsteps with no note attached. Of course, sometimes, a marriage breaks so spectacularly that not even the priest can patch it. That's when the rumors fly. He's been seen with the miller's daughter. She's plotting to move in with her cousin in the next village. He's run off to join the king's army, unlikely. As he's more likely to trip on his own sword, she's taken a vow of silence, or possibly just lost her voice from yelling. In these rare cases, the community must adjust. Land is divided, alliances shift, and children are pressed into service as reluctant messengers between households. The wheel of village life turns, creaking but unbroken. If you're lucky or unlucky, you might catch the aftermath, one spouse at the alehouse, drowning sorrows and accepting advice from men who are experts in everything but their own lives. The other at the well, surrounded by women who cluck and console in equal measure. There's comfort in knowing that. However dramatic today's quarrel, it will soon be replaced by tomorrow's scandal. The memory of a feud fades quickly in a world that has more pressing concerns like bringing in the harvest, or surviving the winter, or simply remembering where you put your other shoe. And so, as the sun climbs higher and the market's laughter grows louder, you find yourself oddly reassured for all the drama and heartbreak. The village endures, marriages falter, feuds erupt, reputations are bruised, and sometimes, so are vegetables, but life goes on. Tomorrow, there will be bread to bake, fields to till, children to chase, and, inevitably, new stories to tell. In the end, perhaps that's the truest romance of all, not the fairy tale, but the muddle, not the perfect ending, but the daily chance to begin again, messily, stubbornly, together or apart. A short pause, a hush, a gentle smile as you watch the crowd swirl, then fade into the everyday. Even heartbreak, you realize, has its place in the great medieval dance. You duck through a low, creaking doorway as dusk seeps into the alleys, slipping along the thatched rooftops and painting every puddle in the street with the sly. Shifting colors of magic, the air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, rotting apples, and if you pause near the baker's window, a sharp, sweet note of something simmering that might be cinnamon, or might be a chunk of owl's feather. It all depends on whose kitchen you're passing, because tonight, as every night in this medieval town, hope flickers brightest in the shadowy spaces between fact and faith, where charms jostle with secrets and every lovesick villager wonders if maybe, just maybe, this is the season the right spell will stick. You hear it before you see it, the chattering cluck of hens, the snort of a piglet, and underneath, a low murmur, half chant, half gossip, winding its way out from beneath a sagging awning. Inside, a woman sits hunched over a battered table, hands mottled with age, her eyes glinting in the firelight. This is Agatha, midwife, healer, part-time chicken hypnotist, and, on market days, the undisputed queen of love remedies. Her shelves overflow with jars dried rose petals, suspiciously blue eggs, the shriveled toe of a newt. If you're here, it's not for the scenery, it's because something in your chest aches, and you're willing to trade 2 coins, a pinch of pride, and perhaps the name of your firstborn if it means that. Just once, your beloved will look your way. Medieval Europe may be devout, superstitious, and eternally anxious about sin. But when it comes to affairs of the heart, almost anything is fair game. If the priest's advice and a bouquet of wildflowers failed, there's always the apothecary, or, failing that, the cottage at the edge of the woods. You're not alone, desperate wives, bashful suitors, jealous rivals, and that one old shepherd who swears he's immune to Cupid's arrow all slip through the shadows, seeking cures for their particular brand of romantic despair. You step closer, heart fluttering. Agatha greets you with a knowing smile. She's seen the look in your eyes 1,000 times. And if she had a silver penny for every unrequited love who darkened her door, she'd be living in the castle by now. But alas, she's here, and so are you. You lay your question before her, carefully phrased to avoid sounding too desperate. Is there, perhaps, a charm for making someone notice you? Agatha's grin widens. Of course, dearie. There's a charm for everything. The trick is knowing which one won't get you chased out of town by the parish priest. You sit as she stirs a battered cauldron, and the world narrows to this flickering circle of warmth. She tells you about love philters, ancient potions with recipes guarded like royal treasure. Some are innocent honey and rosemary, petals of primrose steeped in dew, a few drops of wine from a cup shared under the midsummer moon. These, she says, may spark a heart, or at least a blush. Others veer into the questionable powdered beetle wings, a splash of blood, herbs with names that sound suspiciously like they could put you to sleep forever. Agatha is careful, her voice low, reminding you that magic walks a knife's edge between blessing and curse. Not all medieval love magic comes in bottles. There are amulets, tiny pouches worn under the shift, filled with dried flowers, a shred of a lover's clothing, or, for the especially daring, a lock of hair stolen from the object of one's affection. You feel the soft weight of one such bag, lavender and thyme, tied with red thread, the string slightly greasy from nervous hands. Wear it on your left side, Agatha whispers. Closer to the heart, never the right, unless you're hoping to make an enemy instead. She's only half joking. Outside, the evening bells toll, and for a moment you imagine the whole village tinged with magic. You're not far wrong. Every household has its own rituals. Bread baked with initials carved in the crust, to be eaten in secret at midnight. Apple peels tossed over the shoulder, hoping they'll twist into the shape of a beloved's first letter. The girl who sleeps with sage under her pillow on St. Agnes's Eve, certain she'll dream of her future husband, though sometimes all she dreams of is goats. In the absence of certainty, hope becomes the strongest potion of all. Of course, magic's currency is not just hope, it's also risk. The church frowns on love charms, sometimes loudly, sometimes with an ominous visit from a minor canon whose knowledge of forbidden texts is suspiciously detailed. More than one poor soul has found themselves doing penance after being caught with a suspiciously knotted ribbon. or a cake containing just a little too much mugwort. Yet, the lines are blurry. Is it truly magic if you pray over the potion first? Is a charm just a blessing in a fancy disguise? Agatha shrugs, the wrinkles in her face deepening. Let the priests worry about that. You just worry about not using too much belladonna. The power of magic, like the power of love, is as much in the believing as the brewing. You watch as she chants over the cauldron, the language old and lilting, half Latin, half local dialect, and entirely incomprehensible. You see a line of hopeful faces pressed to the window. Everyone in the village convinced they're the only one seeking help tonight. For every would-be lover who wins a smile with a potion, there's another who drinks one, grows bold, and blurts out a declaration that would never have left their lips otherwise. Is it the magic or the courage, or both? Does it matter? If hearts are stirred and cheeks flush red in the candlelight, you leave Agatha's hut with a warm pouch, a whispered blessing, and a sense that the world is just a little more charged with possibility. The sky is heavy with stars. You pause at the crossroads, the pouch hidden beneath your tunic, your thoughts spinning with dreams of moonlit dances and secret glances exchanged over the barley field. The air smells of earth and wood smoke, sharp and promising. Tonight, you understand why magic endures, even in a world of plows and prayers. Because sometimes love needs a nudge, sometimes hope needs a taste of honey and rosemary, or the tickle of time on the skin. Sometimes, when all else fails, the only answer is to believe just for a moment that somewhere in this crooked, stubborn world, the right charm will work. And tomorrow, the person you love might finally look back and smile. A pause, the hush of night pressing close, the promise that, at least for tonight, possibility is alive in every breath, every heartbeat, every secret pouch tied tight against your heart. You step outside as the village has slipped into that deep, velvet blue hush that comes just before dawn. Only the faintest light edges the rooftops, and the world feels hushed and suspended, caught in that old, delicious moment where anything could still happen. Maybe the air tastes a little sweeter, as if centuries of secrets are curling up from the damp grass, waiting for you to notice them. If you stop to listen, really listen, you might catch the flutter of wings as a barn owl swoops low over the fields, the faint creak of a signboard swinging in the breeze. Or, if you're lucky, a distant echo of laughter from the pub where last night's stories are still circling the rafters. This is the hour when folklore breathes the loudest. Every stone in the road seems to have absorbed a story. Every hedge conceals a legend. And even the starlings on the power lines look like they're ready to weigh in with advice on matters of the heart. If you were hoping the strangest medieval dating rituals faded away with plague and pointed shoes, I'm sorry to disappoint you. Some ideas, like the last slice of bread at a feast, just refuse to be thrown out. Because here's the thing, even if you strip away the mud and the prayer beads, the mossy cottages and the moonlit rituals, what you're left with is a yearning so universal, so stubbornly human, that it clings to us still. In the end, everyone wants to be chosen, and medieval wisdom, blunt, weird, occasionally gross, has a way of surviving, morphing, and popping up when you least expect it. You set off down a muddy lane, boots squelching, following the faint glow of lanterns in the distance. Maybe you're not after love tonight, but you find yourself tracing the old superstitions anyway, because some part of you wants to see if the ancient rules still apply. Here's a quick experiment. Pick a blade of grass, tie it in a knot, and whisper the name of your secret flame. If it stays green by morning, so says the village, your love is true. If it wilts, well, you can always blame the weather. The world is still peppered with these vestiges of medieval courtship magic. Apples, they're not just for lunch. Toss the peels over your shoulder, and watch them land. They might spell out the initials of your beloved. Hide an apple under your pillow and wait for prophetic dreams, though, in reality, you're more likely to be visited by a mouse. Rosemary and thyme tucked under the mattress or woven into your belt are believed to draw true love near, though mostly they just keep your mother happy that you finally smell like something other than sheep. Some of these rituals are so tenacious. You can still spot them if you know where to look. At weddings, Guests tie shoes to the bumper of a car, a distant echo of tossing shoes after the bride. An old fertility charm, with roots tangled in medieval mud. Coins slipped into shoes, bouquets caught and carried home. Even the slightly awkward first dance all are shadows of a time when a well-placed touch or a token offered at the right moment might mean the difference between a lonely winter and a lifetime of bickering over who forgot to stoke the fire. You pass a cottage where the shutters are painted blue, a color once believed to ward off the evil eye, and keep wandering suitors from cursing the house with envy. You wonder, not for the first time, if maybe that's why so many houses on the edge of the village have gone for Blue Door's old wisdom and new paint. As you drift further, the wind rattles through the hedgerows, and you remember another bit of advice, passed down through generations with the seriousness of a papal decree. Never pick a lover on a Sunday. Never swear love by the moon. Why no one remembers. But the rules are there. Sticky as syrup, impossible to wash off. It's not just the rituals that endure, it's the stories that go with them. Every region has its own collection of lovelorn ghosts, enchanted forests, and trickster saints who specialize in matchmaking or mischief. There's the tale of the girl who dropped her kerchief in the stream, and rather than ruin her best linen, fished it out with a song, only to have her true love appear on the opposite bank. Or the boy who carved his beloved's name into the bark of a birch tree, only to have the tree sprout twin trunks the next spring proof, so the elders said. Of a love that would never stand alone, you can almost hear the old folks by the hearth, voices pitched low, faces lit by the flicker of the fire. It's the hungry ghosts you have to watch out for. One mutters, they slip into bed on Christmas Eve if you haven't said your prayers, curl right up at your feet and nibble away your luck for the coming year. Another counters, but if you hang rowan berries over your door and sweep the floor backward on the first night of May, you'll keep the meddling spirits at bay, and maybe even dream of your future husband unless you eat too much cheese before bed. In which case, all bets are off. Sometimes the advice is oddly practical. If you're in love with a miller's daughter, goes one saying, bring a fresh loaf, not just flour's bread lasts longer, and a miller's daughter knows how to test a man's dough. If a black cat crosses your path on the way to a meeting with your sweetheart, go home and wait for another day. Love delayed is better than love jinxed, and sometimes you realize. The advice was always less about magic and more about wisdom, how to read a room, how to spot a fraud, how to laugh when your plans go sideways, as they almost certainly will. It's easy to scoff at old remedies and folk charms, but they were survival tools as much as love spells, ways to cope, to hope, to keep hearts soft in a world built on hard choices and harder winters. Modern life might feel shinier, but the advice hasn't changed all that much. Maybe you've never brewed a love potion, but you've definitely changed your shirt 3 times before a date and agonized over a text for an hour. Maybe you've never tossed apple peels or hidden sprigs of rosemary, but you've scrolled through 100 profiles looking for a spark, checked your horoscope, or asked your best friend if they think your crush likes you back. You wander back toward the village green, the first rays of sun catching the weather vane, and you realize that some part of you likes that. The old ways linger, even if you're not sure you believe. After all, the most persistent wisdom isn't about who to love or how it's about daring to try, again and again, in the face of odds, embarrassment, and the sneaking suspicion that everyone else knows what they're doing. You find yourself humming an old song, words drifting back from 1,000 hearths and midnight fields, as long as the moon waxes and the grass grows green, as long as apples fall and hearts go astray. There will be stories to tell and charms to tie. There will be hope for lovers, yet unborn. The day has begun, the mist is lifting, and somewhere in the world, someone is tying a ribbon, whispering a name, or laughing at their own hopeful heart. Maybe. Just maybe. Some piece of medieval dating advice still weaves its way into the morning, not as a rule, but as a wink, a reminder that, despite all the centuries and all the wisdom, the game of love is never quite the same, but it's never truly new. Either a hush, the sun rising, the village waking, stories quietly curling into the new day, and you, still smiling, with 100 odd ideas tucked away, just in case.